right, here's a question. Is government broken? A simple question with huge ramifications for the country and for members of Congress in this election year. Now, Senator Evan Bayh sounded that warning this week as he announced he will not seek re-election, saying the Senate has become so partisan it's almost impossible to get anything done. So CNN will be focusing on this question this week. And we're getting started tonight with our independent voter panel, because we like hearing these voices from our independents. There he is. He's becoming a regular now. Joe Gandelman is the editor-in-chief of the Moderate Voice blog. He is joining us live from San Diego. Hello, sir.
Hi.
Omar Ali is a historian and an independent voting analyst in Washington. Hello to you again. And there she is, Nicole Kurakawa, an independent voting analyst in Washington. So I want to start by asking you, I'll start with you, Nicole, what is broken government and what's not broken government? So or should it be left alone? Is the government broken? Is it not? Should it be left alone?
I don't think the government is broken, actually. I think, we're not able to get a lot of legislation through right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the government overall is broken.
Why do you say you don't think it's broken?
Like I said, just because we're not passing healthcare legislation or cap and trade doesn't mean that the process is broken. The founders envisioned a slow, deliberative legislative process, and that's what we're seeing right now. These are major decisions that are trying to get pushed through, and the public isn't necessarily behind all of them. So I think seeing that things are taking slower, or things are going slower than perhaps they would have otherwise, is not necessarily, it doesn't mean that things are not working.
Okay, Omar Ali, we talked about Evan Bayh saying that he's not going to run for re-election. He gave that press conference, and then today he wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times, says, "Why I'm Leaving the Senate" by Evan Bayh. And he goes on to talk about it, basically talking about partisanship. This morning on ABC, Governor Ed Rendell in Pennsylvania, and also Governor, who was he on with this morning? Rendell and Governor Schwarzenegger from California, excuse me. On this morning, Rendell was talking about partnership, and so was Schwarzenegger, and he said this. Schwarzenegger says, "I am working with Governor Rendell. I'm also working with independent Michael Bloomberg." And that's why this partnership is so perfect, because Bloomberg's an independent, Rendell's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. So what we're trying to say is that we're rebuilding America, but it's not a political issue, it's a people issue. We want to serve the people of America. Then he went on to say this about the stimulus plan and hypocrisy. Take a listen.
I find it interesting that you have a lot of the Republicans running around and pushing back on the stimulus money, and saying this doesn't create any new jobs, and then they go out and they do the photo ops and they're posing with the big check and they say, "Isn't this great? Look what the kind of money I provide here for the state, and this is great money to create jobs, and this has created 10,000 new jobs, and this has created 20,000 new jobs," and all of this kind of things. It doesn't match up. So exactly. So I mean, I think
hypocrisy at the highest level.
So listen, if what he says is indeed true, then what is the solution, at least for independents? Do you believe that is true, and do you believe that independents have a solution? And I guess the question is, do you believe that Republicans and Democrats can work together with this as an independent?
Well, I think that all kinds of partnerships are great. I think that's fine. But it's more than just partnerships between the two major parties. We're not looking for bipartisan governance in this country. I think Americans are looking for nonpartisan governance, and independents definitely have solutions that have been practical and have been working. So for instance, in terms of the national level, things that are being demanded by independents are including independence in the Federal Election Commission, including having open primaries across the country, and nonpartisan redistricting. See, it's not just individuals getting together at the high levels of governors or
Do you think independents are included enough? Do you think there's enough there?
No, there's not. In fact, there are structural limitations against independents from participating as full-fledged citizens in this country. In some ways, there's a sort of a Jim Crow against independence in this country, which runs everything from getting on the ballot if you want to run for president.
What do you mean by that? Explain that to our viewers.
Well, what it means is that, for instance, if you, say, Don, wanted to run for president of the United States, you would have to get over 30 times the number of signatures than you would if you were running as an independent than if you were a Democrat or a Republican.
And you think that's discriminatory?
Absolutely. The Federal Election Commission is made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. It's bipartisan. It's not a nonpartisan entity, and yet they're overseeing all these campaign election rules which discriminate against independents and third-party candidates. So there are structural issues that independents are concerned about. Redistricting is another issue. So there are a whole set of structural issues that independents have been raising, and leaders in the independent movement have been raising this for many, many years. People like Jacqueline Salet, people like Dr. Lenore Fulani, Jim Mangia, and there's all kinds of leaders out there that have been pushing for this for many, many years. And so I think it's a great opportunity now, as the Tea Party movement has kind of come up, and that they can distinguish themselves from the independent movement, because the independent movement is far more inclusive than what we see out there.
And Jim, perhaps this was one of the nicest discussions I have seen. I was talking about that interview this morning on ABC about a Republican and a Democrat working together, and I think Governor Schwarzenegger said, listen, people in Washington have to figure out that they're working for the good of the people and not for the good of the party. So Jim, Joe Gantleman, sorry, Joe, so what do you say to that?
Well, I think what's happened is that gamesmanship has begun to trump policy. And when Evan Bayh talked about the fact that our politics has become almost tribalism, it's become, I've often said, like a sports team, where nobody's really, they don't want to listen to each other. Everybody's too interested in scoring points and checkmating the other. And I also think that there really are some real problems with government working right now, because I'm totally in agreement with Evan Bayh, what he said about the filibuster. I think until they put it down to 55 votes and the Senate has to be there for it to take place, it could be abused. The problem is that both political parties want the filibuster when they're not in power, and they don't want the filibuster when they're in power. So both parties, they're really hypocritical on the issue of the filibuster.
Well, there is a case, though, that people said, you know, if you really want to make a difference in Washington, you don't quit. And they made that same criticism of Sarah Palin as well. So there is the thinking that if Evan Bayh wanted to make a difference, then he should stay in there and fight.
And he really should have. But he probably just felt like he was bumping his head against the wall. See, the real danger with the way our politics is going right now is that thoughtful people and people that are really not into what I call the talk radio political culture, where there's this demonization and name-calling, and you try to take somebody out, you try to basically...
It's really become theater. It really is.
It's professional wrestling is what it is. Yep.
So listen, I asked Nicole. Nicole said she doesn't believe that the government is broken. Joe, do you believe the government is broken?
I think right now what we see in Congress is broken. I don't think the founding fathers wanted to see this kind of paralysis, where there's tyranny of the majority, but there's also tyranny of the minority right now. And I think that, and it's hard to sift that out, because the minority is going to be the majority, the majority is going to be the minority. But right now, the Congress is not working, and a lot of people are really disgusted because nothing's happening.
Omar, do you believe the government is broken?
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Joe was saying, which is that the latest CNN poll came out saying that 86% of Americans believe that the government is broken. I mean, 85% of Americans don't want to see Congress re-elected. So there's a great deal of anger against the parties, and independents have solutions that they're offering to do something about the political paralysis that's out there. So I think that, you know, what we're going to see in the coming sort of months and in the coming years is the rise of the independent voter in ways that are going to help shape.
Stop right there. What independents, or where should we be looking for these independents? Is there an independent somewhere or a number that you can point out that we should be paying attention to?
Absolutely. There's actually, anybody can go to it. Independentvoting.org is a site that brings together associations of independents from around the country. It's being led by Jacqueline Salet, who's been somebody who's been at the forefront of pushing for these structural reforms. So people can go to these places. There are associations of Americans who don't want to be affiliated with either the Democratic or the Republican Party. They want to be independent. Now, independents may swing one way in one election cycle and then another way in another one, but their message remains the same. Yeah. Something must be done about the political and partisan paralysis that we have in Washington, D.C.
All right. Omar, Joe, and Nicole, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday. It's always a great conversation. Wish we had an whole hour or longer to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, CNN is taking really hard look at the cracks in our system. We're cutting through the political games for you and looking for the fixes here. In a new series, again, we're calling it Broken Government. Look for it all this week, right here on CNN.